The phone rang just after midnight, a number I didn't recognize and a voice I hadn't heard in 5 years. He said my name softly, the way he used to as a child, and then asked a question that made my knees give way. "Mom, why are you on my flight?" I live alone now, in a quiet apartment near the edge of the city, where airplanes pass overhead like distant thoughts. My son, Aaron, died years ago in a mid-air accident that the news stopped talking about far too quickly. Grief settled into my life like dust, thin, constant, impossible to fully wipe away. I had learned to live with silence, until the night the sky decided to speak back. The room was already quiet when the phone vibrated. Not rang. Just one soft tremor against the wooden nightstand, like something shifting in its sleep. I hadn't moved yet. The ceiling fan turned slowly, clicking once every few seconds, like it was counting time for me. The streetlight outside leaked a pale stripe across the wall. Everything felt paused, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Then the vibration stopped, and the silence that followed felt heavier than the night before it. I sat up slowly, careful not to rush the moment. Grief teaches you that sudden movements can break things you didn't know were fragile. My feet touched the cold floor, and the chill traveled up my legs, grounding me in the present. The phone lay face down. I told myself not to look. I told myself it was nothing. Spam, a wrong number, a machine dialing into the dark. The kind of call that disappears if you ignore it. But my chest was already tight. When I turned the phone over, the screen glowed softly. No missed call notification. Just one small symbol in the corner. Voicemail icon. Me. Patient. Waiting. I hadn't received a voicemail in months. No one leaves messages anymore. They text. Or they don't call at all. The clock on the wall read 12:17 a.m. That hour carries a certain weight. It always has. The hour when thoughts come back uninvited. When memories don't knock. I picked up the phone, my fingers stiff like they didn't belong to me. The glass was cool. Smooth. I noticed a smudge near the corner and rubbed it away with my sleeve. I was already shaking, though nothing had happened yet. Press play. First there was only air. A soft, uneven sound like someone holding a phone too close to their mouth. Breathing. Low. Controlled. Then a low hum came in beneath it. Constant. Mechanical. Familiar in a way that made my stomach drop before my mind could catch up. An engine. Not a car engine. Something deeper. Steadier. The kind that never stops once it starts. I leaned forward without realizing it, my elbows resting on my knees. The room felt farther away now, like I was listening from underwater. There was a pause. Faint rustle. Then a voice. "Mom." Just one word. Quiet. Careful. The voice cracked something open in my chest that I had spent years sealing shut. It wasn't distorted. It wasn't older. Didn't sound like memory playing tricks. It sounded exactly the way it used to sound when he was tired. When he didn't want to wake me fully. Just enough to know he was there. My son's voice said my name again, softer this time, as if he wasn't sure I was listening. And then, the message ended. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a small electronic click. I didn't move right away. My thumb hovered over the screen, unsure what to do now that the impossible had already happened. The voicemail timer read 11 seconds. Not long enough to hold a lifetime. Too long to be nothing. I replayed it. Again the breathing. Again the hum. Again that single word that had once meant safety. I searched for signs of manipulation. A trick of sound. A voice pulled from an old video, stitched together by some cruel mistake. But there were details my memory wouldn't invent. The slight hesitation before he spoke, the way his breath caught at the end. I pressed play a third time. This time I noticed something else. In the background behind the engine there were faint sounds. Clink. A muffled voice over a speaker. The distant cough of someone else nearby. Life. Continuing. My hands began to ache from how tightly I was holding the phone. I set it down carefully as if it might break. Or disappear. The room felt different now. Thicker. As if the walls had leaned in just a little. I whispered his name into the quiet, not expecting an answer. None came. But the silence no longer felt empty. I sat on the edge of the bed until my legs went numb, staring at the dark screen like it might light up again if I stayed still long enough. The ceiling fan kept turning. The clock kept ticking. Outside, somewhere far above the clouds, a plane passed overhead. I heard it the way you feel pressure change. Subtle, unavoidable. I wondered then if grief ever really leaves. Or if it just waits for a sound familiar enough to wake it up. The voicemail icon stayed where it was. Unforgiving. And for the first time since I buried my son, I wondered if the dead ever learn how to dial back. And if they do, why tonight was the night he chose to call. Morning light slid through the curtains without asking permission. It touched the edge of the dresser, the corner of the mirror, the dust that never quite settles. I stood there holding my coffee, watching steam rise and disappear, thinking about how many mornings had started exactly like this. Outside, a plane passed overhead. I didn't look up. I hadn't looked up in years. The sound used to feel sharp, like something tearing open the sky. Now it was just another noise. Like traffic. Like the hum of the refrigerator. Quiet had taught me how to survive. After Aaron died, the world learned how to keep going without him faster than I did. The news cycle moved on in a week. Another story replaced his. Another headline took its place. I remember watching the television, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for someone to say his name again. They never did. Condolence letters arrived in neat stacks. Envelopes with careful handwriting. Words like thoughts and prayers written by people who meant well and didn't know what else to say. I opened each one slowly, as if the paper itself might bruise me. Kept them all. Even the ones that said nothing at all. Time passed in strange shapes after that. Days folded into each other. Weeks lost their edges. I stayed inside that first week for a long time. The phone calls, the paperwork, the moment they handed me his watch in a small plastic bag. The world outside kept adjusting its pace. People laughed again. Doors reopened. Planes kept flying. At first, every sound from the sky felt personal. Cruel. Like a reminder that something terrible could happen and still not stop anything else. Eventually, even that softened. That's what quiet does. It dulls the sharpest things until you almost forget why they hurt. There's a suitcase in my closet I've never opened. It sits on the top shelf, tucked behind winter coats I rarely wear. Navy blue. Scuffed at the corners. Aaron packed it the night before his flight, humming to himself, folding his shirts the way I taught him when he was small. I remember standing in the doorway, watching him, wanting to say something important. Something that would make the moment last. I didn't. After the accident, I carried the suitcase home myself. No one offered to help. Felt wrong to let someone else touch it. The zipper was half closed, just the way he left it. I told myself I'd open it when I was ready. Years went by. Sometimes I stand on the chair and rest my hand on the top of it, just to remind myself it's real. That the weight is still there. That I didn't imagine a whole life and then lose it. This morning after the call, I opened the closet and looked up at it longer than usual. The house was silent except for the soft tick of the hallway clock. For a moment I thought about taking it down. I didn't. Some things feel safer unopened. I tell myself the call was memory misfiring. That grief doesn't disappear. It just finds new ways to speak when you least expect it. I've read that somewhere. In one of those articles people send when they don't know what else to offer. The mind is powerful, they say. The mind can recreate voices. I repeat that to myself while washing the mug, while folding laundry, while standing at the window pretending to care about the weather. I say it like a fact, like something proven. Still I replay the voicemail. Not out loud, just in my head. The way he said Mom. The pause before it. The sound underneath his voice. Memory is usually softer than that. Blurred at the edges. This felt present. Alive in a way I wasn't prepared for. I try to remember the last real voicemail Aaron left me. It was years before the accident. He'd laughed halfway through it, distracted by something off camera. I saved it until my phone died one winter and took everything with it. That loss hurt more than I admitted. I sit at the kitchen table now, fingers wrapped around nothing, staring at the empty chair across from me. I imagine him there, tapping his foot, waiting for me to finish worrying. I shake my head. Grief doesn't call from unknown numbers, I tell myself. Does it? By afternoon the sky is busy. Planes pass every so often, white lines cutting through blue. I notice them again against my will. Each one leaves a faint echo behind, like a thought that doesn't quite finish. I stand by the window longer than necessary. The voicemail icon is still there when I check my phone. Unchanged. Patient. I don't delete it. I don't replay it either. Somewhere between believing and remembering, there's a thin, dangerous place. I feel myself standing there now, unsure which direction is safer. The world outside keeps moving. Always has. But tonight, when the sky darkens and the house grows quiet again, I know I'll be listening, just in case memory decides to speak twice. The phone rang while I was standing at the sink. Not loud. Just enough to cut through the sound of running water. I didn't answer right away. I watched the bubbles slide down the inside of the glass, slow and fragile, like they might disappear if I looked too hard. The ringtone kept going, steady, patient, unfamiliar. My hands were already wet when I reached for the phone. I dried them on my shirt without thinking, leaving a dark patch over my ribs. Before I pressed answer, I stood very still, as if the room might tell me what to do. I hadn't planned on picking up. That's what I told myself later. That I only answered because my hands moved before my thoughts caught up. The truth is, part of me had been waiting for it to ring again. Waiting the way you wait for thunder after lightning. Afraid, but unwilling to leave the window. The number wasn't saved. Just a string of digits that meant nothing on their own. No country code I recognized. No name. My thumb hovered. I thought about the years of silence. The way I'd trained myself not to expect anything sudden. Not from phones. Not from life. When I finally answered, I didn't say hello. I listened. For a moment there was only background noise. Soft, constant rush. Like air moving through something narrow. Mom. He said it clearly this time. No hesitation. No doubt. I leaned back against the counter, my knees weak. The cold surface pressed into my spine, holding me upright. I don't have much time, he said gently, as if we were picking up a conversation we'd paused. Closed my eyes. His voice wasn't distant. It wasn't echoing or warped. It was close, present, like he was speaking into his phone from the other room. Like he'd never left. He started talking the way he always used to when he was nervous, filling the silence with details. Small ones. Ordinary ones. I'm in the aisle seat, he said. Middle of the plane. They changed it at the gate. I pictured him there without trying. The narrow rows. The faint hum beneath everything. There's a little shake, he added. Nothing bad. Just enough to spill the coffee if you're not careful. I could almost smell it then. That burnt, bitter scent that lives in airplane cabins. Coffee mixed with recycled air and something metallic. He laughed quietly. Not really amused. Just habit. They haven't dimmed the lights yet. I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my fingers hurt. I didn't interrupt. I didn't ask questions. I was afraid sound from my end might break whatever thread was holding this together. Then he said it. Flight numbers the same as last time, he mentioned casually. Funny how they reuse them. I opened my eyes. My mouth felt dry. What number? Yes. There was a pause. Not long. Just long enough to notice. He said it. Slowly. I turned and reached for the pen by the phone, my hand trembling as I wrote the numbers on the back of an envelope. The ink bled slightly where I pressed too hard. I didn't know why I was writing it down. I just knew I had to. The call ended the way the first one did. No warning. No goodbye. Just a soft click and the sound of air disappearing. I stood there long after the screen went dark, staring at my own handwriting. The numbers looked wrong on the paper. Too sharp. Too real. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. It took longer than usual to load, like it was reluctant to join me in this. I typed the flight number into the search bar. Once. The page refreshed. And then, there it was. Scheduled departure, tomorrow morning. Time. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer to the screen, reading every line as if it might change if I didn't pay attention. Same airline. Same route. Different year. I checked the date again. Tomorrow. Not archived. Not historical. Active. Boarding. My hands began to shake. I closed the laptop and opened it again. The page stayed the same. How could something that ended years ago still be moving forward? I thought of Aaron's voice. Cabin lights. Coffee. I thought of time, stretching and folding in ways I didn't understand. The room felt suddenly small. Like the walls had shifted closer while I was looking away. I folded the envelope with the number written on it and held it in my palm. It was warm now. That evening, the sky turned the color of old glass. Easy. I stood by the window and watched the light fade. My reflection layered over the city outside. Somewhere above me, planes traced invisible paths, each one following a plan written long before it ever left the ground. I pressed the folded paper between my hands, feeling the crease dig into my skin. The phone lay silent on the table. I didn't know what I was waiting for anymore. Another call. Another detail. Another reason to believe or let go. Tomorrow felt too close. Like something already moving toward me. As the first stars appeared, I realized I wasn't afraid of hearing his voice again. I was afraid of what might happen if I didn't. Sleep stayed just out of reach that night. Not gone. Just hovering. The bedroom was dark except for the thin blue glow of my laptop on the desk. It pulsed softly like a quiet heartbeat. Every few minutes, a car passed outside, tires whispering against the road, reminding me that other people were still moving through their lives. I lay on my side, staring at the wall, counting the spaces between sounds. The house wasn't restless. It was. When I finally sat up, it felt less like a choice and more like gravity pulling me somewhere I didn't want to go. I made tea I didn't drink. The kettle clicked off, steam curling into the air, fogging the kitchen window for a moment before fading. I carried the mug back to the desk and let it sit beside the computer, untouched, a thin skin forming on the surface. Midnight passed without ceremony. I refreshed the page again. The flight number stared back at me, unchanged. Still scheduled. Still ordinary. The kind of listing no one notices unless they're looking for it. Departure time. Gate assignment pending. A neat little box that pretended nothing else had ever happened. My eyes burned, but I didn't blink much. I was afraid that if I did, the page might shift. Or vanish. I thought about the way airlines reuse numbers. How something can carry a history without acknowledging it. Like a name passed down without the stories attached. I told myself this was all practical curiosity. That I was only looking to reassure myself. Prove the call meant nothing. That's what I said out loud. The house didn't argue. I typed slowly, carefully, adding words like incident and accident and archive. I avoided typing Aaron's name. Felt too direct. Like calling into the dark again. The clock on the wall clicked forward. 1 minute at a time. The articles came back in pieces. A headline here. Paragraph there. Most were familiar. I recognized the phrasing before I read it. Tragic loss. No survivors. Investigation ongoing. I skimmed past the parts one already knew. The technical language. The quotes from officials. I searched for details that hadn't stayed with me. Something I might have missed the first time when shock had blurred everything. The flight number appeared again and again. Same digits. Same order. It felt strange seeing it treated like a simple label. Like a coat check ticket. Something interchangeable. I opened another tab. Then another. That's when I found it. Not an article. Forum. The design was old, untouched by time. Gray background. Blocky text. Usernames instead of real names. The kind of place people go when official answers feel too clean. The thread title caught my eye. Calls before impact. I hesitated before clicking. The first post was years old. Written late at night, judging by the timestamp. Someone claiming they'd received a voicemail from a relative hours before a crash. Breathing. Static. No clear message. Replies followed. Some sympathetic. Some curious. Most dismissive. Grief does strange things. Phones glitch. Memory fills in gaps. I scrolled slowly, my finger hovering over the trackpad like it might burn me. Then I saw another comment. Different username. Different year. Same flight number. My chest tightened as I read it. The commenter didn't say much. Just that they'd gotten a call. That the voice sounded calm. That it mentioned the cabin. That it ended abruptly. No explanation. Someone replied beneath it almost immediately. Coincidence, they wrote. That flight number's been reused dozens of times. Another added a laughing emoji. People hear what they want to hear. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under my weight. The sound felt loud in the quiet room. I wanted to close the page. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen it. That the world was still solid, still predictable. Instead, I kept reading. There weren't many posts like that. Just enough to feel intentional. Just enough to feel wrong. Each one brushed aside by logic. By probability. By people who hadn't been awake when the phone rang. I imagined all of us sitting in separate rooms, years apart, staring at glowing screens, wondering the same impossible thing. I thought of Aaron's voice. The way he mentioned the flight number like it meant nothing. Like it was a shared detail we both already understood. I shut the laptop. The sudden darkness startled me. My reflection disappeared, replaced by the room as it really was. Dim, ordinary, unchanged. The tea had gone cold. I carried the mug to the sink and poured it out, watching the steamless liquid disappear down the drain. The sound was small. Final. When I returned to the bedroom, the clock read 3:12 a.m. The hour when explanations thin out and questions grow louder. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, listening to the building settle. Somewhere above me, pipes knocked softly like distant footsteps. I thought about rumors. About how easily they form. How memory can dress itself up as fact when it's lonely enough. Still, the forum post stayed with me. Not as proof. As possibility. The line between what we remember and what we're told to forget felt dangerously narrow now. And as sleep finally crept in, slow and uneasy, I wondered who else might be awake tonight. Refreshing a page. Waiting for a name to appear where it shouldn't. Dawn hadn't arrived yet, but the night was thinning. That soft hour when darkness loosens its grip, and everything waits to see what will come next. I was awake before the phone rang. Lying on my back. Open. Listening to the building breathe. Somewhere, a pipe knocked once and went quiet again. The phone lit up the room without sound. Just the screen. Ill. Expectant. I knew before I reached for it. Some part of me had already answered. The air in the room felt cooler than it should have. I pulled the blanket closer, though it didn't help much. My body was tired, but my mind had learned a new kind of alertness. One that doesn't rest, only waits. Outside, the city was still asleep. No traffic yet. No voices drifting through open windows. Even the birds hadn't decided whether to begin. I picked up the phone and held it there, watching the seconds tick by at the top of the screen. The number was the same as before. Name. Untraceable. Familiar now in a way I didn't like. I thought about letting it ring. I thought about the years I'd spent teaching myself restraint. How silence can feel like control if you practice it long enough. Then I answered. I didn't say hello. I just breathed. Morning, Aaron said. His voice was steady. Neutral. Almost casual. It sounded like he'd just woken up from a nap. Like he hadn't noticed anything unusual at all. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, afraid I might miss something small. Crack. Tremor. Anything that would explain this. How's the weather there? He asked. I glanced toward the window. The sky was still dark, but a thin line of gray had begun to stretch along the horizon. Cold, I said. My voice sounded strange to me. Older. Like it had lived through things his hadn't. It's been cold. "Ha," he replied. "Figures." There was a pause, filled with that same low hum I'd come to recognize. Constant. Surrounding him. "Still in the apartment?" he asked. "Yes." "The one near the tracks?" "Yes." He nodded, though I couldn't see it. I could hear it somehow. That small sound people make when they're confirming a picture in their head. "Do you still keep that plant by the window?" he asked. "The one that never did very well?" My throat tightened. "No," I said. "It didn't make it." "Oh," he replied. Not sad. Just noting it. "You always overwatered it." A ghost of a smile touched my mouth and disappeared just as quickly. He sounded fine. Not frightened. Not confused. Not broken. I waited for him to say something else. Something meaningful. Something that would tell me how this was possible. Instead, he asked about the building manager. About whether the elevator's still stuck on the 4th floor. About a bakery down the street that used to burn their bread. All small things. All from a life that had stopped. I gripped the edge of the bed, my fingers digging into the fabric. "Aaron," I said quietly. "Yeah." "What year is it?" Question hung between us. The hum grew louder for a moment, or maybe I was just noticing it more now. There was shuffling on his end. Faint clink. Like a seatbelt being adjusted. "That's a weird question," he said lightly. I didn't answer. Seconds passed. Each one felt heavier than the last. "I think," he stopped. Started again. "I think it's the year I left." My heart stuttered. "The year you left," I repeated. "Yeah," he said. "Why?" Closed my eyes. The room tilted just slightly. Like standing up too fast. I imagined a place where time doesn't move forward. Where nothing progresses enough to hurt. Where voices stay the same because they never learn what comes next. A place where grief can't reach. "What's wrong?" he asked. There was a note of concern now. Just a hint. "You sound tired." "I am," I said. That much was true. The call didn't last much longer after that. It faded gently. Like the end of a conversation neither of us wanted to stretch too far. He told me he'd call again. Said it like a promise. Like something ordinary. When the line went quiet, I sat there staring at the phone in my lap. Outside, the sky had begun to change. Pale blue pushing against the dark. The first bird called out, uncertain, then went silent again. I walked to the window and rested my forehead against the glass. It was cold. Solid. Real. Somewhere, Aaron was moving through a place where years didn't pass. And here I was, aging quietly in a room that remembered everything. As the sun finally broke the horizon, I realized the most frightening part wasn't that he sounded the same. It was that, for a moment, so did I. The phone rang in the middle of a quiet afternoon. Not the sharp kind of ring that demands attention. This one felt hesitant, almost careful. Sunlight lay across the living room floor in long, pale strips, catching on dust I hadn't noticed before. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, as if nothing in the world had shifted at all. I was folding laundry. Low. Deliberate. One shirt at a time. When the phone vibrated against the table, I stopped mid-fold. The fabric slipped from my hands. And before I even looked at the screen, I felt the question coming. I'd spent the morning trying to be ordinary, making toast, watering the plants that had replaced the one Aaron remembered, letting the radio play softly without listening to the words. Normal things. Anchors. I told myself the calls couldn't keep happening. That whatever door had cracked open would surely close on its own if I didn't push it further. But the number was already there when I picked up the phone. A name. Familiar in its persistence. I sat down before answering. The chair made a small sound beneath me, the kind it makes when it remembers weight. "Aaron," I said before I could stop myself. "Yes," he replied. Immediate. The hum was louder this time. Closer. Like the air around him was unsettled. I pressed my free hand against my knee, grounding myself in the room. The table edge was smooth beneath my fingers. The sun was warm on my arm. Here everything made sense. I needed to hold on to that. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Mom," he said, and there was something different in his voice now. Not fear. Confusion. "Why are you here?" I swallowed. "I'm not," I said carefully. "I'm at home." There was a pause. Or, disbelieving. "That's not what it says," he replied. "What does it say?" asked. He shifted, and I heard a faint rustle, fabric against fabric. A low announcement crackled somewhere behind his words, too muffled to understand. "Your name's on the screen," he said. "Passenger list. Right next to mine." My heart thudded once. Hard. "That's impossible," I said. "I haven't flown since." I stopped myself. "Since you." "I don't fly anymore," I finished. "I never got back on a plane." Another pause. Longer this time. "But it's there," he insisted. Not accusing. Just stating a fact. "Your full name. Spelled right. No middle initial missing. No typo." Closed my eyes. I pictured my name printed in neat black letters. I hadn't seen it on anything official in years. Not like that. "There must be a mistake," I said. "Maybe," he replied, but his voice lacked certainty. "But it's not blinking. It's not grayed out. It looks normal." Normal. The word felt wrong in my chest. I stood up and paced the length of the room, the phone pressed tight to my ear. Each step felt too loud. The floor creaked softly beneath me, like it was reacting to my unease. "Aaron," I said. "Listen to me. I'm not there." "I know," he said quickly. "I mean, I thought I did." The hum swelled suddenly, growing uneven. I heard a sharp sound in the background, metal shifting, a cart rattling against the aisle. The calm in his voice thinned. "The plane just shook," he said. "They're telling us to stay seated." My chest tightened. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Yeah, it's nothing," he replied too quickly. "Just some rough air." But the connection crackled now, breaking his words into pieces. "Aaron," I said again, louder this time. "Mom," he answered, and the words stretched strangely, pulled thin by static. "If you're not here, then why would they put your name?" The line jolted. A loud rush filled my ear, like wind forced through something narrow. I heard a muffled voice over a speaker, sharper now. "Urgent." Silence. The call dropped. I stood there staring at my phone, the screen already dark, my reflection faintly visible where his face should have been. I didn't move right away. The room felt hollow now, as if something had been taken from it without leaving a mark. The sunlight had shifted, creeping farther across the floor, indifferent to everything that had just happened. My phone vibrated once. Not a call. Just a notification lighting up the screen. My breath caught. I didn't open it. I held the phone in both hands, suddenly afraid of what might be waiting there. My name in a place it didn't belong, a confirmation I wasn't ready to see. Somewhere above me, far beyond the ceiling and the quiet sky, turbulence was shaking something loose. And for the first time since the calls began, I understood what the question really meant. Not why I was there, but how long I had been on my way. The drawer resisted at first. Would swollen with time. Dust packed into the seams. I hadn't opened it in years. Not because I forgot what was inside, but because I remembered too well. When it finally slid free, it made a sound like a low sigh. Papers shifted. Old receipts whispered against each other. The smell that rose up was unmistakable. Paper, ink, something faintly metallic. My fingers hovered over the contents. I didn't know what I was looking for. Only that something had been waiting long enough to be found. The drawer belonged to another version of me. The one who still traveled. Still argued about small things. Still believed there would always be another chance to fix a moment that went wrong. Inside were mundane things. Manuals for appliances I no longer owned. A birthday card never sent. A pen that hadn't worked the last time I tried it, and wouldn't now. I sat on the floor, back against the bed, letting the drawer rest open like a wound that hadn't healed right. The afternoon light slanted in through the window, catching dust in the air. Each particle drifted slowly, unhurried, like it didn't know what time meant. My phone lay face down on the nightstand. Silent. Heavy with everything it hadn't said yet. I reached into the drawer and began lifting things out one by one. Not searching. Just moving through the past carefully, as if it might bruise if I rushed. That's when I felt it. Paper, folded smaller than necessary. Pressed flat. My hand stopped. Already knew. The ticket was tucked between old bank statements, as if hiding among things that mattered less. It was creased neatly, edges aligned with care that felt deliberate. I unfolded it slowly. The sound was soft, final. Same airline, same route, same flight number. The date stared back at me, sharp and unblinking. A day I hadn't visited in a long time. A day I told myself I remembered clearly, until now. My name was printed at the top. No typo. No mistake. I traced the letters with my finger, as if touch might change them, or confirm they were real. This was the return ticket. The one I never used. Memory filled in the rest without being asked. The argument, quiet at first, then sharper. Over nothing important. Something about timing, about whether he really needed to leave so early. Words stacked on top of each other until neither of us could see past them. I remember standing in the doorway, arms crossed. I remember him pausing, hand on the handle. "You don't have to come," he'd said. Not angry. Just tired. Stayed. I told myself I'd book another flight later. I sat there on the floor, ticket trembling slightly in my hand, as the weight of it settled in. I was supposed to be there. Not as a passenger on a list. Not as a name on a screen. But beside him. I had planned to take the return flight together. That was always the plan. Sit next to each other. Share headphones. Complain about legroom. Laugh about nothing important. Instead I stayed home. I told myself I needed space. That we both did. The world rewarded that choice with silence. Guilt arrived the way it always does. Quiet at first. Then sharp. Pressing into familiar places. Not new. Just awakened. I folded the ticket back along its old creases. It felt like following instructions written by someone who believed in order. A thought surfaced then. Uninvited. Dangerous. What if the universe doesn't forget? What if it keeps lists too? I thought about Aaron saying my name was on the passenger screen. Spelled correctly. Placed carefully. Not an error. An omission corrected. The room felt smaller now. Like it was closing ranks around me. I pressed the ticket to my chest and waited for my breathing to slow. Didn't. I returned the ticket to the drawer, placing it back exactly where I'd found it. Same position. Same careful fold. As if disturbing it further might change something I wasn't ready to face. When I pushed the drawer shut, it slid more easily this time. Outside, a plane crossed the sky, low enough to hear clearly. The sound lingered longer than usual, stretching thin before fading. I stood by the window, watching the empty blue it left behind. The phone remained silent, but now when I looked at it, I understood the shape of what was coming. The calls weren't asking me to remember. They were reminding me. And as the afternoon light dimmed, one question stayed with me. Steady, unavoidable. If I was meant to be on that flight once, what made me think the journey was over? The light in my apartment flickered once, then steadied. Not a blackout, just a reminder. Outside, the sky had that washed-out look it gets before rain. Too pale to be evening, too tired to be afternoon. The ceiling fan turned slowly, clicking on every third rotation, like it was counting something I couldn't see. I stood barefoot on the cold tile, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Aaron breathe on the other end. Between us, there was distance measured in miles. And something else. Something thinner. Aaron's voice sounded farther away today. Not quieter. Just stretched like it had to travel through more than air to reach me. "I think they're dimming the lights," he said. I pictured it instantly. The way cabin lights soften, surrendering brightness little by little. The moment when everyone realizes the flight has entered its long middle stretch, where time loses its edges. In my apartment the air felt different. Heavy. Thick against my skin. like the moment before the first drop of rain hits the ground. I hadn't opened a window all day, but it felt like something unseen had closed in around me anyway. Aaron described the sky outside his window. "It's strange," he said. "Not dark, not blue, just blank. I imagined clouds swallowing color. A sky that forgot what it was supposed to be." I sat down on the couch, the cushions sighing under my weight. The fabric was warm where the sun had rested earlier, still holding on to it. "People are quieter now," he said after a pause. Waited. "Not asleep," he added. "Just still." I didn't ask why that unsettled me. Already knew. He told me some passengers were staring straight ahead. Hands folded. Eyes open but unfocused. Like they were listening for something beneath the hum of the engines. "The seatbelt sign's still on," he said. "But no one's complaining." That wasn't like people. I paced the room slowly, phone pressed tighter to my ear. Each step felt louder than it should have. The floor creaked beneath me, the same spot as always. Like it remembered where I was standing. Aaron's words began to blur around the edges. Static crept in, faint but persistent, like wind pushing against a closed door. "Say that again," I whispered. His voice wavered, then steadied. I said, "The air feels different up here." I stopped moving. "Different how?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, it wasn't with words I expected. "It feels like waiting," he said. Silence followed. Long enough for me to hear my own breathing. Long enough for the refrigerator to click on in the kitchen. I imagined the cabin suspended in that colorless sky. Metal and bodies held together by trust and routine. By physics. By belief. "Are you scared?" "Yes." He exhaled slowly. "No," he said. "Not exactly." The call crackled. There was turbulence then. Not violent, just enough to be felt. Aaron paused mid-sentence, breath catching slightly. "You still there?" "Yes." "Yes," he said. But the words stretched thin, distorted around the edges. He told me the captain had spoken. Voice. Reassuring. The kind that says everything without saying anything important at all. "They asked us to stay seated," he said. As if anyone planned to stand. In my apartment the ceiling fan slowed then stopped. The sudden quiet pressed in on me, heavy and immediate. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Aaron continued, his voice lower now. "Some people are holding hands," he said. "Strangers." Pictured it. Fingers interlaced with unfamiliar ones. Comfort borrowed without permission. "That woman across the aisle," he added. "She's crying. But she's smiling too." Closed my eyes. The static grew louder. Words slipped, came back wrong. "Aaron," I said. "Listen to me." "I am," he replied. But it sounded delayed. Like an echo answering from a hallway that kept getting longer. A thought settled in my chest, heavy and unwelcome. How long can a voice stay tethered to the living? I thought of the unused ticket. The name on the screen. The universe's careful handwriting. The call cut out for a second, then came back thinner. Fragile. "Hey," Aaron said softly. "If this drops." Did. The line went dead with a hollow sound, like air rushing out of something sealed too tight. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Whoa. Patient. The sky darkened at last, color returning in shades of gray. I lowered the phone slowly and looked around my apartment. The furniture. The walls. The life that stayed. Somewhere above, between air and ground, a cabin floated through a colorless sky. And I understood then that waiting isn't always stillness. Sometimes it's the longest movement there is. I set the phone down carefully, and waited to see which side of the silence would speak next. The clock above my stove blinked 3:12, then went dark, then came back again. It had been doing that all night. Losing itself. Finding itself. Outside, the rain finally started. Not heavy, just enough to mark time against the windows. Each drop arrived alone. Careful. Like it didn't want to wake anyone. I stood in the kitchen holding my phone with both hands, knuckles pale, waiting for it to ring again. When it did, the sound cut straight through me. I answered before the second ring finished. Aaron was already speaking. "I think we're descending," he said. His voice was steady. Too steady. The kind of calm that comes after decisions have already been made. "No one said where," he added. "But I can feel it." I leaned back against the counter. The surface was cold, grounding. Real. In the apartment, everything was painfully ordinary. A dish towel folded too neatly. A mug still half full from yesterday morning. The plant by the window, the one he asked about weeks ago, leaned toward the glass, leaves dusted and dull. I hadn't moved it in years. "Are the lights still dim?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Lower now." I imagined the cabin sinking gently, like a held breath being released. Seatbacks upright. Tray tables stowed. Rituals people perform when they don't know what else to do. My chest felt tight, but I kept my voice soft. "Stay with me," I said. "Just stay on the line." "I am," he replied. But something in the space between his words told me he was already pulling away. The sound of engines came through faintly, layered under his voice. Low, steady hum. Familiar. Almost comforting. "Mom," he said. He hadn't called me that in a long time. "They're asking us to put our phones away." I didn't, he added. I stayed. Closed my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. The rain picked up, tapping faster now. The window rattled slightly. The apartment responded the way it always did. Small noises, small acknowledgments. "Aaron," I said. "Listen to me." "I'm listening." "Think of the lake," I said. "The one near the old house. The dock that leaned to the left." He was quiet. "The boards were always warm," I continued. "Even at night. Remember how you used to lie there and count the stars you could see through the trees?" His breathing changed. Just a little. "I remember," he said. "Hold on to that," I told him. "Hold on to anything that keeps you here." The engines grew louder, then softer. Like the plane was choosing its moments. "Mom," he said again. "Yes. Do you regret not being there with me?" The question landed slowly, carefully, like it had been waiting for the right place to fall. I didn't answer right away. The kitchen light flickered. The clock came back on. 3:18. Regret is a strange thing. Doesn't shout. Settles. It lives in drawers you don't open and tickets you never throw away. "I regret the argument," I said finally. "I regret the way I let silence win." He didn't respond. "I regret not saying I loved you one more time," I added. "But not being there." My voice broke, not loudly, just enough. "I thought staying meant protecting you," I said. "I thought there would be another flight. Another call." The rain slowed again like it was listening. "I loved you every moment," I continued. "Even when I wasn't beside you." There was a sound then. Chime. Almost polite. Aaron exhaled. "They're telling us to brace," he said. I gripped the edge of the counter. The wood dug into my palms. "Fight it," I said before I could stop myself. "Please. Stay." He was quiet for a long time. "Mom," he said gently. "I don't think this is something I fight." The words didn't feel cruel. They felt settled. Like truth. I understood then that love isn't always enough to keep doors open. Sometimes it just stands beside them. The line began to crackle again. Stronger this time. Louder. "I'm not scared," Aaron said. "I just wanted to know if you'd come with me. If you could." I swallowed. "I'm here," I said. "I've always been here." There was a soft smile in his voice when he answered. "I know." The sound faded. Engines. A hum. His breathing. Then only rain. I lowered the phone slowly, my reflection staring back at me from the dark screen. Outside, the storm moved on. The streetlights flickered back to life, one by one. Somewhere between what was and what never came to be, a choice had been made. Not to hold on, but to let love finish speaking. And for the first time that night, The silence didn't feel empty. Felt complete. The house was still when the last call came. Not sleeping, just holding its breath. The refrigerator hummed low like it always did near dawn. The clock on the wall had stopped blinking. Finally chose a time and stayed there. Outside, the sky was thinning. That pale gray that comes before morning decides what it will be. My phone vibrated instead of ringing this time. Softer warning. As if it already knew this moment needed gentleness. Picked it up slowly. Before I said a word, I could hear the wind. It sounded like air rushing through a narrow place. Not violent, just fast, purposeful. Static wrapped around Aaron's voice, but he was there, present, clear enough. "Mom," he said, "I think this is the last one." I sat down at the kitchen table. The chair legs scraped softly against the floor. The sound echoed longer than it should have. The room looked different in the early light. Colors faded. Edges softened. The mug on the table had a thin crack along the handle I'd never noticed before. "I'm here," I told him. "I know," he said. "You always are." The wind grew louder, then quieter again, like something adjusting its grip. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "For what?" "For staying," he replied. Even when it got strange. I thought of all the nights I'd sat alone after he died, listening for things that weren't there. For footsteps. For breathing. For a voice that never came. "I didn't feel alone," he continued. "Not once." I pressed my free hand flat against the table, grounding myself in the grain of the wood. Neither of us rushed the silence. There was no need to fill it anymore. The static pulsed, then settled. "They made an announcement," Aaron said. "Just now." Waited. "They didn't say where we're landing," he added. "Just thanked us. Told us to remain seated." His voice carried a kind of calm I hadn't heard before. Not the calm of resignation. Something cleaner. Lighter. "I looked up," he said. "At the screen." My throat tightened. "My name was there," he continued. "And yours." Closed my eyes. "They had you listed as a passenger," he said softly. That's when I understood. "Understood what?" I asked. "That I wasn't forgotten," he said. "That even when things end the wrong way, they still remember where they belong." The wind surged again, loud enough that I had to press the phone closer to my ear. "I'm not scared," he said. "I just wanted you to know that." A plane passed overhead, then low, distant. The sound rolled across the ceiling, through the walls, and out the other side. I followed it with my eyes, even though I couldn't see it. "Aaron," I said. "If you could come back, would you?" He didn't answer right away. The static thickened. The wind howled briefly, then softened again. "I think," he said slowly, "that if I came back, I'd still be looking over my shoulder." "For what?" I asked. "For this moment," he replied. His honesty didn't hurt. Settled. "I don't feel pulled anymore," he continued. "Just finished." The word lingered between us. Finished. "I used to think endings were loud," he said. "Explosions. Sirens. People crying." A faint smile crossed his voice. "But this," he said, "this feels like being thanked." I felt something loosen in my chest. Not break. Just unclench. "I'm proud of you," I told him. He breathed out. Low. "That means more than you think." The static began to thin. The sound of wind stretching into something farther away. "If they ask you questions," he said gently, "you don't have to answer them." "What questions?" I asked. "About why," he said. "About how." The line wavered. "Some things don't need explaining," he finished. And in that moment I knew he was right. "I love you," I said. "I know," Aaron replied. "I always knew." The connection faded gradually. No sudden cut. Just a soft thinning of sound, like fog lifting from a field. Then nothing. I stayed where I was, phone still to my ear, listening to the quiet that followed. Outside, the sky brightened another shade. Morning moved forward, indifferent but gentle. A second plane passed overhead, higher this time. Quieter. I set the phone down on the table. Some goodbyes don't come with answers. They come with understanding. And as the house finally exhaled around me, I realized that silence, when it's earned, can be a kind of grace. Morning didn't arrive all at once. Slipped in. Light crept across the living room floor, slow and careful, like it didn't want to wake anything that had finally fallen asleep. Dust floated through it, soft and unashamed. Even the walls seemed lighter, as if they'd been carrying something all night and had finally set it down. I stood barefoot near the window, the phone still on the table behind me, untouched since dawn. Outside, the sky was pale and open. No thunder. No warnings. Just quiet. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. I made coffee and forgot to drink it. The mug warmed my hands anyway. That felt like enough. The apartment looked the same, but it wasn't. Or maybe it was me. The plant by the window, thin, stubborn, had tilted toward the light overnight. I hadn't noticed when it happened. Growth has a way of being discreet. I opened my laptop and typed the flight number 1 last time. My fingers hesitated before hitting enter. Not fear. Respect. Page loaded. The number was gone. In its place was another flight. Ordinary. Time. Full of people who would complain about legroom and bad movies and reheated food. A flight that would land somewhere real. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to, waiting for my chest to tighten. Didn't. Instead there was a space. Hollow, yes, but not a painful one. More like a room after guests leave. Quiet. A little sad. Manageable. I closed the laptop gently, as if it could feel gratitude. The world, it seemed, had decided to move forward again. And for the first time I didn't feel abandoned by it. Open the drawer. The one I hadn't opened in years. It made the same soft protest it always did, the wood swollen from age. Inside were old things arranged with too much care. Receipts, keys that fit nothing, folded notes written in handwriting I barely recognized as mine. And the ticket. I lifted it slowly. The paper had softened with time. The fold remembered itself. Same flight number. Same date. My name printed neatly like it had always believed I would show up. I ran my thumb over the ink. Years ago, touching this felt like pressing on a bruise. Immediate. Now it felt finished. I didn't reread the details. I didn't need to. The argument that kept me home that day had long ago lost its shape. What remained was the understanding that staying had changed everything, and leaving might not have saved anything at all. I folded the ticket once more and placed it back in the drawer. This time I didn't hesitate. I closed the drawer with both hands, steady and sure, and listened as the sound settled into the room. Stayed closed. So did the past. Plane passed overhead. I felt it before I heard it. A low vibration in the glass, a gentle pressure in the air. Instinctively, my shoulders tensed. Then I looked up. The plane moved cleanly across the sky, leaving nothing behind it. No scar. No echo. I followed it until it disappeared. Something in me shifted then. Not dramatically. Just enough. For years, planes had felt like accusations. Like reminders of where love had ended and luck had intervened. I used to stop walking when I heard them. Heart racing, breath shallow, counting seconds I couldn't name. Now, standing there, I realized I wasn't counting anymore. I was watching. I wondered about the people inside. Someone sipping coffee. Someone asleep. Someone staring out a window, thinking their thoughts were private. I wondered if any of them felt watched. Or if the watching had always been mine. The calls hadn't come to warn me, or punish me, or rewrite anything. They came because I was still listening. Because grief, when it softens, sometimes reaches back, not to pull but to release. I leaned my forehead against the window. The glass was cool, solid, real. Later, the day found its rhythm. Cars, voices, a distant dog barking at nothing important. I watered the plant by the window and turned it slightly, just enough to help it grow straight. It didn't resist. When another plane passed overhead, quieter this time, I smiled without meaning to. Sometimes I still wonder. About the calls. About the timing. about who reached out first. But the question no longer feels urgent. Some connections don't belong to one side or the other. They exist in between, like air and ground, like memory and breath. And when the sky goes quiet now, I don't listen for what's missing. I listen for what remains.